Python. It's everywhere, right? Powering Instagram, driving groundbreaking AI, you name it. We love it because it's so simple and powerful. But it has a secret, a paradox really, that every developer bumps into sooner or later. So let's pull back that curtain and figure out this whole performance paradox thing.
And that's a great question, isn't it? How can the world's most popular language, the one everyone is using, have this reputation for being, well, slow? Kind of like the tortoise in a world full of programming hares. That's the big mystery we're going to get to the bottom of.
And, I mean, you really can't deny its success. Just look at the TOB index, the thing that tracks how popular programming languages are. Python's been in the top tier since way back in 2003. It's basically the official language of machine learning at this point. Why? Because it's easy to learn, a breeze to read, and you can do almost anything with it. So here's the deal, the central conflict. It's like a coin with two very different sides. On one side, you've got the promise of Python. Super readable, a massive universe of libraries for anything you can imagine, and this huge, helpful community. But then you flip the coin, and that's the problem side. Because it's an interpreted language, it's just naturally slower. It really struggles to use all the cores in your fancy modern CPU, which creates these huge bottlenecks when you're doing heavy-duty calculations. To really get why, we gotta pop the hood and see what's going on inside.
Okay, first up, memory management. I know, it doesn't sound like the most exciting topic in the world, but stick with me here. It's absolutely crucial if you want to understand why Python behaves the way it does.
Let's try an analogy. Imagine your computer's memory is just a giant library. The shells are your hardware, right? Well, Python's memory manager is the librarian. It's the one deciding exactly where each book, each piece of your data, is going to go. And, just as important, it's the one who cleans up and removes the books that nobody's reading anymore.
Now, this is a really key difference, especially if you're coming from a language like C++ or Java. In those languages, you think of a variable as a box, and you put your data in the box. Well, Python doesn't really work that way. It doesn't have variables in that sense. It has names. Think of them more like labels or sticky notes that you just slap onto an object that's floating around in memory.
So, check this out. When you type something as simple as x equals 200, a whole bunch of stuff happens behind the scenes. First, CPython, that's the standard implementation of Python, creates this thing called a PyObject in memory. It says, okay, this object is an integer and its value is 200. Then it creates the name x and basically tells it to point to that object. And finally, it starts a little counter on the object, a reference count, and sets it to 1. That's our librarian making a note that one name is currently looking at this piece of data.
And that reference count is super important. It's how Python's automatic cleanup crew, its garbage collector, does its job. The main idea is pretty simple. When that count on an object drops all the way to 0, the garbage collector knows nobody needs it anymore, and poof, that memory is freed up. Now, for trickier situations, like when you have objects that point to each other in a big circle, there's a backup system called tracing that comes in to find and clean up those messes. It's all automatic, which is awesome for developers. But all this managing, it has a cost.
Okay, but let's talk about the big one, the main culprit, the performance bottleneck that you always hear people talking about. It has a name, the Global Interpreter Lock, or for short, the GIL. This quote really nails it. The GIL is basically a big lock, a mutex, if you want the technical term, that protects all of Python's objects. What it does is it makes sure that only one thread can run Python code at a time. Let me say that again. Only one thread at a time. So even if you've got a beast of a machine with 16 cores, the GIL means only one of those cores can actually be running your Python code at any given moment. And this timeline shows you exactly how frustrating that is. Okay, so thread A grabs the lock, it starts running, but look, threads B and C, even though they're on their own separate CPU cores, are just sitting there, waiting. They can't do anything. Then thread A finishes and releases the lock. The operating system goes, okay, your turn, thread C, and gives it the lock. And poor thread B, still waiting. You see what's happening? It takes what should be parallel work and forces it into a single file line. It completely kills the benefit of having multiple cores for a lot of Python work.
So if the GIL is this massive roadblock, what are people doing about it? How are developers getting around this lock? Well, it turns out they're getting really, really clever.
There are basically two big ways people are tackling this. On one hand, you have tools written purely in Python, like Dask. They're awesome because they're portable and easy to use. The catch? The part of Dask that schedules the work, the scheduler, it also has to fight for the GIL.
Then you have the other approach, external runtimes. These are written in a compiled language like C++. The Cyrun system we looked at is a perfect example. The magic here is that its scheduler can do its job without having to ask the GIL for permission, which makes it way faster and more responsive.
And the numbers don't lie. Look at this. When you throw a bunch of tiny tasks at 16 threads, that optimized C++ runtime, sciminimal, gets a 12.6 times speedup compared to running it on a single thread. That's a clear win over the pure Python options. Just by smartly avoiding the GIL, it squeezes out that much more performance.
And get this, in the absolute worst-case scenarios, where all the threads are constantly fighting each other for that lock, this new optimized runtime was up to 6 times faster than the version before it. That's not a small improvement. That is a huge leap, all from designing your system to work around the GIL.
But what if we didn't have to work around it? What if we could just get rid of the GIL entirely? Well, that's not just a dream. It's something the Python community is seriously looking at. There's a proposal on the table, PEP 703, to make the global interpreter lock optional in future Python versions. This would be a game changer, a massive shift that could finally unlock true multi-core power right inside Python itself.
So while the Python world is figuring out what to do about the GIL, a brand new challenger has stepped into the arena. It was designed from the very beginning to fix these performance problems. Meet Mojo. Now, Mojo isn't trying to kill Python. Think of it more like a superset. It's designed to look and feel just like Python, so you already know how to use it. But under the hood, it's a different beast. Instead of being interpreted, it uses this really advanced compiler called MLIR to optimize your code for the actual hardware, like your GPU. And, most importantly, it was built from the ground up with no GIL. It's all about parallel processing from day one.
And the performance claims, they are just wild. For some really intense, computationally heavy tasks, the creators of Mojo claim it can be up to 35,000 times faster than regular Python. No, that's not a typo. 35,000. That's the kind of speed that could totally revolutionize fields like AI.
Okay, so all of this leads to the big question for any developer watching this. What's the move? Do you stick with good old reliable Python? Do you make the jump to this new high-performance thing, Mojo? Or is there another option?
The truth is, it's probably not an either-or choice. Look, Python is still the king for general-purpose programming, for building websites, for most data analysis. Its ecosystem is just unbeatable. But for the parts of your code that are really performance-critical, Mojo is an incredible new tool in the toolbox. The future is probably hybrid. You'll build most of your app in Python for its flexibility and speed of development, and then you'll rewrite just the bottlenecks, the slow parts, in Mojo to get that insane speed.
And that kind of leaves us with a really interesting final thought, doesn't it? Maybe this whole thing isn't just about Python versus Mojo. Maybe what we're really seeing is the future of how we all build software. A future where we write, say, 90% of our code in a simple high-level language, and then for that last 10% that needs to be blazing fast, we just plug in a specialized high-performance language. It's the best of both worlds, right? And in a world that's only getting more complex, that might be exactly what we need.